What used to be a content strategist can now be a content engineer. With AI, the ability to do incredibly powerful and impactful work sits with an individual more than it did in the past. I don't go off vibes, but I think people overuse vibes at times in lieu of a formal interview process. I don't want to be biased until I'm ready to be biased. I'm going to throw people in the deep end kind of right away. It says a lot about people that they can figure it out. The interviewing person walked in and talked to me, just rolled a whiteboard pen across the table and told me to basically come up with revenue estimates for the next 3 years, and then just sat and watched while I did the math on the board.
Welcome to Whispered Hiring, the podcast where we talk with senior leaders about how they find, vet, attract, and grow go-to-market talent. I'm Andy Mowat, founder at Whispered. Today I'm joined by Nicole Baer. I'm really excited about this one. Nicole is the CMO at Carta. She and I got the privilege of working together for, I think, a year, maybe a little bit more. And so we got to partner really closely. Nicole leads global marketing across every function of Carta: brand, demand gen, product marketing, and more. And before that, she's held marketing positions at Logitech, Zendesk, and Aon. And she's also founded 2 marketing consultancies. So she really knows her stuff. We're going to have a lot of fun diving deep today. And since I know Nicole, I can ask lots of fun questions as well. Nicole, welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you. Let's go for it, Andy.
I love it. Well, maybe if we kind of kick it off, like, how do you think about designing a role on your leadership team?
I think the first thing is, number one, making sure I do need someone on my leadership team. I think there really needs to be a lot of thought that goes into the exec team. Do you really need an exec in the role that you're contemplating? And if you're in a period of time where the business strategy is not yet articulated, it's going to be very difficult to bring in a new exec to drive anything, within the function if sort of the business strategy is in flux, which I think is a great place actually to drop in fractionals, for example.
I love that.
But yeah, I think the first question is, should this be an exec role? What do you want out of this person as an exec, and making sure you're really clear on that.
I like that a lot. And I like that you touched on fractional. I think marketers do more than anybody, but it gives you the ability to bring in specialists in different areas. How do you think about, do you test out positions with fractional, or how do you think about those? Or Is it more like, I want to take my time to find the right person and I want to have the expertise, or how do you approach fractional?
I think it's sort of all of the above. I've used fractionals to scope roles that I needed, kind of getting to that question of, do I need an exec in this role? And what do I want the remit of this role to be? So I think fractionals help you sort of in a very hands-on way figure those things out. I think they can also help you test a person. Oftentimes when I come into a role and I know I need a certain type of person, whether it's a brand person or a demand gen or whatever, I might have someone in mind, but having them play the role fractionally is a good way of testing, are they actually a good fit for this company, this culture, this team, separate from the ways that I might have worked with them in the past.
That's really neat. I mean, we've had 40-ish people on the podcast already, and I always hear executives, particularly with all the craziness that's happening in companies, say, I wish companies would try before they buy, and to do that. It's neat to see that you do it. I think you learn so much about somebody in the first 3 months that it sounds like fractional is a way for you to build that relationship without setting the wrong expectations as well.
100%. And then it also gives, the other thing about it is it's not only to the benefit of the company, but also of the person. They get an opportunity to sort of try before they buy with a full-time role, and also see if do they want a full-time role at this stage in their career? Do they want to remain fractional? So it really kind of is the best of all worlds, I think.
Yeah. How do you evaluate when you see a resume and it has a lot of fractional on there? I mean, you were one of those people when you interviewed at Carta, I think, and you were able to step into that full-time role. I think there is a little bit of negative bias towards people that are fractional. I'm curious how you evaluate that when you're looking at somebody.
Yeah. It's interesting because I don't think about it that way at all. I think about it that they got broad experience and hopefully at a lot of different kinds of companies. And I think that is incredibly valuable to bring to a new, especially if you're going into a fast growth company or an AI native company, where you need to be able to move fast and learn and tackle complexity quickly. Then being a fractional that's like by definition what you have to do as a fractional, right? You have to jump in, you have to like be able to understand, deep subject matter of the company and their customers and their strategies, et cetera, and be able to turn that into action fairly quickly. Like that's the expectation of a fractional, right? You're not going to have, generally speaking, a slow ramp, the same way that you might for an FTE, right? Like you might have different expectations for a fractional. So I think if someone has been a fractional in many different companies, and I don't even think that's a bias that I've also been a consultant in a fractional before, I think it's actually really can be a positive as long as it's not sort of indicative of lack of commitment.
Yeah.
Right? Like not really wanting to commit to one role, because then I would question, do you want to remain a fractional or are you looking for something that's full-time?
Yeah. It's, I think the other challenge people have with fractional is how much of it is fractional is covering for not working versus fractionals covering for people that are doing 5 or 6 things. I heard one person say in 2021, the best people were fractional. Which probably was you were fractional because it's like they could do that and they could go to lots of different places. But now it's hard to distinguish who's really like doing 4 clients, juggling a lot, learning at a rapid rate versus trying to figure out the next thing.
Right.
How is I know you've spent a lot of time thinking about AI. We talked about it when I was at Carta. In the last year, it's changed so much. How does your org structure change? Both within the constraints of Carta, but then also like how do you think about it over the next year in terms of both AI and just redesigning the org?
Yeah, super interesting. So I'm thinking a lot about this. And I think there are a few different sort of vectors of thought that I have around AI for marketing. The first is, around sort of the idea of content engineers and go-to-market engineers. These are terms that have been popularized by vendors and sometimes I'm resistant to those things because I think it's good marketing, but I think there's some veracity in that too. That these roles are starting to, what used to be a content strategist can now be a content engineer, right? What used to be a go-to-market strategist is really now more around go-to-market innovation more broadly, and so. I'm kind of thinking about this in 2 different ways. One is what is sort of the evolution of marketing roles that pattern alongside specific parts of what AI can do for marketers. So that's like the sort of the content engineering path. The other one is thinking about how do you take really smart people and sort of apply them against the concept of how do we do more innovation with AI. And that becomes their role. It's like a very capacious job, right? Like go figure out how we're going to use Claude to solve this problem. And so I'm also thinking about that rail too of actually sort of generalist. For right now, they're sort of generalist jobs. I think they will start to take more shape in the future, but that's kind of more along the lines of like the go-to-market engineering path, which is sort of an amalgamation of many different roles that used to be more defined that are all going into like this go-to-market engineer pathway. So I think we'll start to see sort of the both dynamics happening where you see sort of an evolution of jobs that are more along the lines of how marketers and AI are working together for desired outcomes in specific parts of marketing, but then this sort of opening up of generalist roles that are more about how are you using your domain expertise, your cross-functional expertise, and then applying AI to be able to do really innovative work.
I like that. I feel like the production line collapses, right? Instead of having to wait for design, wait for copy, you can now, I've seen a lot of innovative people say like, this is our agent that is thinking in our buyer persona. It's evaluating everything. So it's not just an agent producing, but it's an agent talking to an agent and debating, is this going to land with this customer? And so to me, it 100%. Means instead of having these like everyone's waiting and working on Asana, Now it's like you can have individual people do this, which gets me really excited.
Yeah, 100%. I was going to say the other thing I think is like the AI amplification of jobs that used to, in some ways, sometimes sort of push people who were incredible thinkers into some lower value uses of their time. Like a good example of that to me would be product marketing.
Yeah.
Where, for product marketing, oftentimes to do the great work that they do, they had to spend a lot of time like amalgamating data, amalgamating market research, et cetera, in ways that were more maybe manual. And now they can do incredibly powerful market insights by aggregating data and just prompting the right ways to get the answers that we want, whether it's around marketing and sales orchestration or insights of what's moving deals along, or synthetic market research, things that are just cutting like a much more direct line into answering difficult questions that used to take hours, weeks, months to do.
I've been shocked. Competition monitoring, enablement, fundamentally changing on a lot of these areas. We just actually stopped we have still the podcast agency that produces this, but we had somebody clipping and cutting, and we stopped that person, and I gave it to my team, and within 2 days they had an entire workflow built to find the right clips, clip them, cut them, send them for approval, and then post them, and then judge them. And it's like, I was like, I don't need that EA anymore.
I know. It's crazy. Definitely, that sort of rinse and repeat creative work is being disrupted for sure by AI. But what it's done for us is allow our video editor to focus more on storytelling.
Yes.
So less on the clipping and cutting, et cetera, but instead, like how are they thinking about our video strategy, and how can we extend our video strategy into other surfaces that we didn't previously have it, et cetera. So I think it's, again, like it's about how are we helping humans with sort of spending time on the higher value problems, questions, what requires sort of a human and a brain to do, as opposed to work that really is task oriented and repetitive that can get done elsewhere.
I like that. I agree fully. It's really exciting and scary at the same time. What types of hires, maybe across the seniority stack, and then we'll focus them in on senior people, has that changed in any way? Are you looking for more builders, or what is the type of persona you're looking for changed, Nicole?
Yeah, I think that, there's this whole trend around delayering, et cetera. And I do think that perhaps if I can envision a world where with AI, the ability to do incredibly powerful and impactful work sits with an individual more than it did in the past. And that's really interesting to me, because they don't need the air cover so much, or the budget approval to go get a consultant to go do something, all of that stuff that sort of sometimes managers can get caught up in, and to enable individual contributors. That kind of goes away because the individual contributors can do so much on their own, right? Yeah. And like working cross-functionally is much easier if you have systems access, and you can just, instead of having to go to the sales strategy people and then go to market ops people and then go to, data engineering, whatever, et cetera, they can just build these prompts where they just do that sort of automagically.
Yes.
It means that ICs can have so much more impact than they did in the past. And that's something that I think is really exciting and wonderful, right? For those ICs to be able to do that kind of work.
I think, yeah, absolutely. I mean, before you could have an IC that had a brilliant idea for a campaign, and they'd have to get design approval, get copy approval, make sure it was on brand voice. Now they can be like, Nicole, totally. I just spent the following 3 hours. What do you think? And you may be like, terrible idea, or you may be like, wow, I hadn't thought about that. Let's try that.
Right. And they can also access, we're like, for example, at Carta, we're accessing fully, creating self-service assets for campaigns. So you can just go and grab it. They can go and test message copy, they can grab their personas from Evidenza. Like all of this can sort of happen within one person's domain. And I think that's incredibly exciting.
I know we're here to talk about people, but since you and I spend a lot of time collaborating on systems, what's the one tool that you've bought or love that's changed how your team does work in the last year?
Well, I've talked a lot about AirOps. They're one of my favorites because, I mean, as you know, Andy, we're like a very, a content-rich environment here at Carta, and so much of what's driven our top of funnel has been content strategy, whether that's sort of our educational foundational content or, our insights team, which provides, basically data storytelling. And AirOps has allowed us to combine content marketers with sort of LLM partners and create content workflows that have just been a force multiplier on our ability to generate new content for new markets that feeds top of funnel, but in a very authentic, expert, authoritative way.
That's amazing. Yeah, Carta really is, I think, other than having a lot of shares with Carta, my first exposure was Peter Walker. And I was like, wow, I started following Carta and engaging before I even ever joined there. And it's so powerful to see what you've done on the voice and using data to tell stories. I think a lot of people could learn from Carta on that.
100%.
Say you decide to hire a director plus level person. I think our first instinct is always, go on LinkedIn, find the 5 people we know to ping on this and say, hey, like, I'm hiring. I remember you were good. Are you looking, or do you know anyone that is? After that, because that rarely works, unfortunately, after that, what do you do? Do you post roles? Do you immediately bring in TA? How do you start recruiting before the job is posted? How do you think about that?
I mean, we always bring in TA. That's sort of a requirement. But I mean, typically for a senior role, I'm going to go to my network first. If I don't find anything in my network, then I'm probably going to go to the network of my network. And go to sort of secondary referrals. Like, I will go to people who I think are, great leaders themselves and have led large teams. And I'll say, hey, I'm looking for a director of X. Do you know of anybody on the market? And that can definitely yield results. We basically always involve TA one way or another, but I also always use my network too.
Yeah. Anything, I agree. It's like TA is great screening when you're as busy as you are, right? Like, to be able to find time on your calendar and they can get them in, they can engage them in the process. And so that's good. Are there any, I am imagining, and we've never really talked about this, but that you've built a really deep network over the years. Are there any approaches you take to maintaining that network?
I've become more diligent about this over the last couple of years, I would say. Coming out of business school, there was sort of like, your network is everything. And I was like, is it though? Because I don't know. I sort of felt like, for me, the concept of like networking for networking's sake, I didn't love it. I wanted to like actually make real relationships with people that would be enduring. So I think that was like a good place to start. But then over the years, I think I've realized that your network really is everything. And it sounds sort of trite. And when I was younger, that did. But then now I realize that there's so much truth in that, in the sense that it's not just about getting, a new job or something like that. Your network is also about like how you solve problems, how you find candidates for roles that are really important for you, how you see how other people are thinking about, what's going on in the world, or some, specific challenges that they may have, for example, with LinkedIn. So it's really beyond the like sort of ways that I think people traditionally thought about network, which was all about job seeking. And it really is so much more than that. It's about connecting the dots for you with talent and with challenges. And even, being able to, especially in the age of AI, be able to talk to people about what they're doing has become incredibly valuable for me. Like, I spend so much time with my informal networks. I have formal networks and informal networks. I'm part of the Bay Area CMO group. That's like a formal network, but then I'm also in a ton of WhatsApp, groups, and a Slack group or 2 or 3, and a text group here and there. And those informal networks are amazing to have, because you can pop in on almost anything, be like, hey, I've got this thing going on. Have you solved a similar problem? Or, hey, I'm kind of to what you're doing, Andy, like, hey, I'm heard about this role, like, what does someone think about that company, that leadership team, whatever. And so it's invaluable, and it cannot be sort of understated, I think, how important it is to really take your network seriously.
I agree. I've actually had this one for 9 or 10 years where when I was running RevOps at Box, I met the gentleman at Okta that was running it. And we would start to trade, we'd bring one of our teams in to meet the other team. And so we would do a lot of cross mind share and exchange. And that turned into a Slack group with like heads of RevOps at LinkedIn and Snowflake and all these other people. And now it's to the point where it's 100 people and we all just kind of support each other in careers. And I think the ability to like create those small little micro communities of people that you can get closer to is so valuable.
Yeah, it's valuable for, it's both sort of self-serving for us as individuals, but the community itself gets better for having more quality people in it too. So you bringing more people into it too is something that I think is another function of the network, and keeping them, keeping it sort of fresh and keeping diverse perspectives in a network is bringing in more. I think 100 people might be a lot, but bringing more people to the table who also have interesting things to share with your group can also add a ton of value.
Yeah, it's true. I always think about that Dunbar's number, right? Like it's the 150. It's like beyond that, you'll struggle. And I think that, you get to something like a Pavilion or like a CMO Coffee Talk. They're great organizations, but they end up so much noise that it's hard to find the goodness 100%. In there as well too. Maybe shifting over to interview process. I've been on panels with you. I've never actually sat in an interview with you. And I'd be curious, like, how do you evaluate, mostly senior talent, but just how do you go about that? Is there a process that you run?
I have a process. I take interviewing very, very seriously. Mm-hmm. I don't go off vibes, which, their vibes are important, but I think people overuse vibes at times in lieu of a formal interview process. So I have a way that I always start the conversation. First of all, I like to get to know the person a little bit the first couple of minutes. I think just creating a human connection can create a better interview. And then I start with my favorite question. I always ask the same one, which is, what can you tell me about your professional journey that I can't read from your resume? And that is, I think it's been a sort of a game changer for me. I've asked that question for probably the last 10 years. And it's the reason I like it so much is first of all, some people immediately just start reciting your resume and they're not actually understanding the assignment, right? And I will even tell them, stop. What I asked you was for you to tell me in your own words what I can't read from your resume. I'm not asking for you to rehash your resume. And if they start doing that, it's kind of a red flag to me. Especially
in marketing, where it's about positioning, storytelling, and all of that as well, too.
Totally, 100%. So I always start there, and I think that can be very super revealing, because it's also can that person be a little bit vulnerable in that moment, to not want to paint, a picture that is overly rosy or overly, they're frantically coming up a story in their mind about how to match their professional journey to the job. And if instead they start from a place of authenticity, then you really sense it right from the beginning. So I start there. I'll do a couple of things. I will ask sort of more challenging questions, like, why is this role right for you right now? Why is this company right for you right now? Why is this the time of your life for this role? What gets you up in the morning, with a passion for what you do? I want to see people have a passion for their job, their team, et cetera. So I will ask those kind of general questions, probably the last third of the interview, and I'd say the middle third-ish. I will ask ChatGPT for I will do a prompt, and I'll say, this is the scenario I'm interviewing for, and then usually ChatGPT gives me 25 questions, and I just basically use that as a springboard to then write maybe the 5 questions I want to ask that I think are interesting from what ChatGPT tells me to ask. And so it just sort of is a thinking, sort of gets me sort of a thought, or thought partner. So essentially I have sort of bookends of my customized questions. And then I have sort of the the questions in the interim that I think are diverse enough that I've gotten through a prompt.
I like that. I imagine most people don't actually, I mean, you should reverse that ChatGPT prompt for yourself, right? Like take the job description and be like, give me the top 20 questions. I do think AI role plays, I don't know if you've been playing with them at Carta. I'm seeing so many companies move from enablement where you train people to no, you will need to learn the CEO's presentation. You're going to run through it until you have it right.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing could be happening for interviews as well too.
100%. Yeah, we absolutely are doing that with the ERP pitch, which you probably remember, Andy, but that is absolutely what we're doing, is like nail the pitch completely.
You and I both would love to have seen a dashboard of every rep, and also people like you and me, because we should have done it too, of like what is the percentage alignment with the pitch, and not just reciting it, but understanding it and being able to do
We're
that.
We're doing it in chorus.
I love it. Hyperbound's a neat company that's doing it too. As well, like the AI role plays, I feel like Chorus hasn't quite caught up yet, but we'll see.
We run it through other things to get that, but yes. Yeah.
How would you answer that question about, tell me about your professional background that's not on your resume? I'm curious.
Yeah, that's great. I love you turn it into an interview question for me. So I would say, so my professional journey, from what you can't see in my resume, is really around continuing intellectual curiosity, and seeking new challenge. So sort of at the beginning of my career, knew I wanted to be in tech. That was like, there was never really a question in my mind if I ever wanted to be in anything other than tech, which is interesting. Some of that was growing up in the Bay Area. My dad was an early employee at a startup, so I think I sort of drank the Kool-Aid early. Starting off in tech, and then starting off, my first job out of school was actually in comms, which I think sometimes those initial jobs can tell you what you don't want to do, but they also can be skills that later on you realize were really valuable. So for me, with comms, starting off there was an interesting fit in really teaching me how to sort of thrive in the pressure of the comms world. But it didn't really fully satisfy, I think, like an intellectual curiosity that I had around products. And so I kind of went from taking other people's pitches for products and then moving into product marketing so I could actually develop the pitches for products. That was kind of the evolution for me. And then, product marketing can be a really great place for marketers to start to become like dangerous generalists, I think. And so, moved from product marketing to starting to take on more sort of functions of marketing over time. And then sort of after I had proven that I could run an entire marketing function, then I started taking on other commercial responsibilities like sales and customer success. And that was also sort of not just a, professional challenge, but also intellectually challenging to sort of move, among different domains. And that intellectual curiosity from and empathy that I developed from having so many different roles in the commercial realm really was what drove me forward in marketing leadership roles, because I could partner really effectively with sales and with customer success and with enablement, with product from having been a product marketer. And so all of these pieces sort of came together over time that really supported me in leadership roles and having the right sort of flexible skill set, empathy, and ability to sort of move into different complex subject matter quickly from having had so many different roles that required that.
I like that. I like how you turned it from a chronology to a messaging statement, which was really good.
Yeah.
Okay, how do you reference candidates? Right, there's obviously the front door ones, which are easy, but do you do backdoor? When do you do them in the process?
I totally backchannel.
Yeah. Do you do it early or do you do it late?
Oh yeah, I would say I sort of mid. I don't backchannel right away because what's the point? I don't want to be. Like when I feel like out of respect for my network, when I backchannel, I'm probably starting to get serious about them.
Yep.
So I don't do it right out the gate because I also want to have my own experience of the candidate before I ask for somebody else's opinion. So like, if I feel like they're an interesting candidate and I'm like feeling good about it, like probably mid to late stage, I would start back channeling. But I definitely do not back channel at the last minute.
I've had my thinking change on this one with our guests so far, right? Like Nick Mehta said it well. It's like back channel before you fall in love with somebody. And what I've been shocked by is how early, particularly CEOs, will back channel, right? Like they'll start texting people before they even get in the ATS, and it just happens so much faster. And I think a lot of people aren't prepared for that at the executive level.
Yeah. And I think there definitely are merits for all the ways, but I think, you know, I don't want to, I guess my feeling is I don't want to be biased until I'm ready to be biased.
I like that. You want to give them a chance to like stand on their own merits. Now I've got competing quotes, which is great. Don't want to be biased before ready. I love that. Do candidates ever take themselves out with you, right? Like the questions they ask, are there good questions? Are there bad questions? Are there some that you remember? You're like, wow, that's a great one. I got to use that one myself.
Yeah. I mean, I like candidates that, you know, like the good questions are, you know, tell me about how you're moving into this market. Like I noticed that you've moved into private credit or whatever. Tell me about your strategy there. Like I like those kinds of questions where it's not just about the fact that they are reading on the website, you know, but that they actually they want to hear about like my sort of thinking on strategy, and they want to hear about like how we're going to market on something. I think that is always, I'm like, that's great. It's not just that you are like checking boxes of like, I see you did this or that. They're actually interested in like trying to learn about a little bit more about my thought process. And I think that means they are engaged and they care about leadership style, and they also maybe are matching how they might think about new market entry or a new product launch or whatever against the way that I think about it. And that's, I think, good for both of us to sort of be checking for fit. So I like those kinds of questions, you know, that are a level deeper than what they can just sort of glean from the website. I always like it when people ask about what the KPIs are for certain things, because I think that shows that they're already thinking about how we think about success. And I like having that conversation, asking them, how would you measure this? Like I can also I like those sort of questions they give me that I can kind of turn it back around on them to say, well, tell me how you would think about it. So those are good questions. I think bad questions include like, do I have to come to the office?
Yeah, get the offer first on those things. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, okay. That's not good. That means it could be a struggle to get. We're a 3 day a week in 3 days in office culture, and so if you're already asking me that, then that's a red flag. I think if they're asking too many questions about strategy, where I feel like I'm like, can you actually operate in the world of execution? That's not good. So even though I said I like questions about strategy that are deeper, I don't want it to be an endless series of questions around strategy, because then I'm wondering if they can actually, you know, get things done. And we have, you know, a culture here around execution at Carta, you know, as you know, and we got to have people who can be strategic thinkers but be excellent executors.
I agree. We were talking to another guest earlier this week where he basically said the thing I hate the most is people like, can we do more strategy? I'm like, everything is strategy, but it's like you have to execute on it as well too. And sometimes you see like earlier career people think that there is this career path to C-level when you just do strategy. And I'm like, that rarely is the case. You have to execute, you have to own a number, you have to do all of those things.
I mean, maybe some places, but definitely not here.
Very few, I hope. Well, Carta's done so well. Last kind of maybe wrapping up questions, like what do you do to make senior hires successful? Like, how do you think about that?
It's a great question. I actually just put together another pass at an onboarding document that I think serves its purpose. So I've been thinking about it. I mean, my leadership principle around new hires and especially for my direct reports is I'm gonna spend like deep time with you at the outset, giving you like the insights, the resources, the reading, the context, all of that for the first couple days that you're in seat. I'll help support you, like you meeting with the right people internally, like make that happen, get that all operationalized and deployed. And then after that, you're sort of on your own by design, in the sense that I'm going to throw people in the deep end kind of right away. And the reason for that is because I think that if I enable them with the right resources and tools and, people to meet, context, et cetera, then they're going to figure it out. And it says a lot about people that they can figure it out. It shows that they have grit. It shows that they can be uncomfortable and be able to like manage through discomfort and be able to sort of come out the other side of like, I don't know everything. What am I going to do? And be able to get sort of comfortable with some ambiguity.
Yep.
So it's intentional. It's not like I don't have time to support new hires. It's like, I'm gonna give you all the things and then we're gonna push the ship off the shore and you're gonna go.
I love that. Yeah, it's there's a balance to it for sure. Traditional closing question: like you've led and hired great marketing teams. Who have you learned the most from about hiring? Has it been by just observing lots of people, or have you found any mentors along the way?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely Tom Kaiser, who we both were both reported to for a time. I think that he had a very skilled way of interviewing that I took some cues from, especially around not trying, like being very authentic about what the job is, but in a way that for me felt, as someone like if you like a challenge like I do, like I seek challenges, then it felt like sort of being real about what the job was and its challenges was actually exciting, as opposed to like what am I getting myself into here? It didn't feel like that. It felt like, wow, this could be a really great challenge. And I also felt like it was sort of eyes wide open about what was going to be expected out of me, out of the role. And it was there was a lot. So I thought he was really great at somehow like sort of threading that needle with interviewing. I'll give you a funny example of a counterpoint to that. I think there's a cohort of people who were, I'm not sure if it was just post-MBA students or there was a cohort of the way that Google did interviewing back in the day. But fresh off my MBA from Haas, I was in a group that got recruited by Google for jobs that we did not know what we were interviewing for. And basically, they wouldn't tell us what job we were interviewing for.
Oh, was this the Area 20 or whatever it was, or was this something?
I don't know what it was called, but basically, I went into this interview process where I had literally no idea what job it was. I didn't even know what function it was in, and got to the very end of the process, last interview, and the interviewing person walked in and didn't talk to me, just rolled a whiteboard pen across the table and told me to basically come up with revenue estimates for the next 3 years for Greater Hong Kong, or Hong Kong and Greater China, and then just sat and watched while I did the math on the board. And it was a very strange experience. And I think and I didn't get the job, by the way. And it was just one of the strangest interview experiences I've ever had. But it was one of those things where it was a moment for me around empathy for candidates that I'll never forget. And that, you want people, whether you want people for the job or not, you are still representing the brand in any interview that you have. And so you have to take it very seriously. These are not, these are moments where this person could be a future customer. And so really having empathy for candidates is something that also sort of connects into the same way that, the same sort of way that Tom approached interviewing as well.
I love that. It's so powerful. My worst interview ever was also at Google, so we can share that in common.
Oh, we should talk about that.
We will. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's to carve out the time on a busy, crazy day, but I love the conversation. I'm excited for our next one.
Yeah, happy to do it. Thanks for having me, Andy.
Thank you.